This is the story of the Empire State Building. How a $41 million gamble in the worst economy in American history became a 102-story sci-fi tower that still spits lightning, prints money, and, depending on who you ask, might even be haunted. But here's the kicker most don't know. The Empire State Building doesn't make the bulk of its easy money from offices. It makes it from people like you and me paying for a view. Welcome to capitalism at 1,000 feet.
Before there was a skyscraper here, this block on 5th Avenue was home to the original Waldorf Astoria, Gilded Age royalty. This was old money in marble. But New York was changing. Developers hurled money at the sky. Downtown Manhattan had the Woolworth Building, then 40 Wall Street. Uptown, the Chrysler Building stabbed the sky with its stainless steel crown, topping out at 1,046 feet. New York didn't just need another tall building, it needed a statement, and a couple of men crazy enough to build it. One of those guys was former New York Governor L. Smith. Another was John Jacob Rascop, the financial brain behind General Motors. They teamed up with a group called Empire State Inc. and asked a simple, absolutely insane question. How high can we go before gravity, money, and common sense tell us to stop?
They hired an architectural firm called Shreve, Lamb & Harmon. On paper, these guys were reasonable professionals. In reality, they were about to enter a bar fight with physics. The design changed again and again, 15 times, each version stretching higher, shaving weight, rearranging floors, all to beat the Chrysler Building and 40 Wall Street. Rascop allegedly walked into a meeting, picked up a pencil, held it straight up, and asked his architect, "How high can you make it so it won't fall over?" In 1916, New York passed a zoning resolution that basically said, you can build tall, but you can't turn the streets into permanent night. Designers answered with what became known as the wedding cake style, layer after layer shrinking as you go up. Finally, they settle on a monster 102 stories. Office floors stacked on top of each other like a steel Jenga tower. A roof height of 1,250 feet, with a spike that would push the building to 1,454 feet, if you counted the mast and antenna. The first building on Earth to officially break the 100-floor barrier. In the early 1930s, it looked less like real estate and more like science fiction. And then, the stock market crashed. The Great Depression was starting to roll through the country like a slow avalanche. People were losing jobs, houses, and savings. In the middle of that, Rascop and his partners are still pushing ahead with a skyscraper that would cost about $40.9 million to build. Real money at the time. That includes the demolition of the Waldorf Astoria. It should have cost more. Their original budget was around $60 million. But the Great Depression hammered wages and material prices so hard that the most famous skyscraper in the world actually came in under budget. The plan was simple on paper. It began with the demolition of the Waldorf Astoria in 1929. From there, the new building project demanded a steel skeleton, concrete floors, and an army of workers who weren't afraid of falling 80 stories for $5 a day. Irish and Italian immigrants were hired for the job, alongside Mohawk ironworkers who walked on beams barely wider than a shoe. Louis Hine, the Empire State Building's official photographer, dangling off cables to capture them hundreds of feet above the streets, gave the public a newfound respect for these modern-day heroes of industry. Officially, 5 workers died during construction. Unofficially, some newspapers and later researchers suspected more.
Now for the part that blows my mind every time. Schedule. The skyscraper wars were all about speed. If the other guy finished first, he owned the bragging rights, so the Empire State team pushed the job like a military operation. After the first beams went up, the frame sometimes climbed 4.5 floors in a single week, still rising so fast that some days they added more than 1 full floor in a single day. At the peak, more than 3,500 people were working on the project. But there was one more twist in the race to the sky.
The Chrysler Building had pulled a slick move. Its architect hid a long needle-like spire inside the top floors during construction. Then one day they jacked it up through the roof like a sword being drawn, suddenly making Chrysler the tallest building in the world. Empire State's backers were not the sort of men who said, "Okay, you win." They raised their own height to 200 feet, including the antenna. Officially, this top section was a mooring mast for airships. The idea was that in nice weather, a dirigible could pull up, tie off, and let rich passengers walk down a gangplank 1,200 feet above Manhattan. On paper, it sounded futuristic. In reality, it was ridiculous. The winds up there are brutal. Stabilizing a huge floating cigar full of hydrogen or helium next to a narrow mast above crowded streets? That's not smart. That's a recipe for falling debris and terrified passengers. No full-sized airship ever properly docked. The whole skyport concept was mostly a publicity stunt. The entire structure, 102 stories, went from groundbreaking to completion in just 410 days. And on May 1, 1931, President Herbert Hoover sat in Washington, D.C., pressed the ceremonial button, and the Empire State Building lit up for the first time. 1 year and 45 days to build a tower taller than 4 statues of Liberty stacked on each other. If you've ever waited that long just for your kitchen renovation, you know how insane that is. But outside, the Great Depression was ripping through the country. People were standing in bread lines, the stock market was a mess, factories were closing, office tenants not lining up. In the first year, only about 23% of the Empire State's space is rented. A normal skyscraper back then would open at around 50% full and fill up to 90% within 5 years. This building was more than 3/4 empty. New Yorkers, who cope with everything using sarcasm, gave it a new nickname: the Empty State Building. All floors sat vacant, the lights were off, elevators unused. By 1935, the tower was losing about $1 million a year. So, how do you save a skyscraper that nobody wants to work in? You sell something else. Not desks, not offices, you sell the view. Who could have imagined that the true moneymaker of a 1931 office tower would end up being the tourists, not the tenants? From the street, though, the tower still looked incredible. The weird contradiction settles in. Above, the symbol of American power. Inside, a lot of unused space and unpaid bills. In its very first year, the observation deck brought in roughly $2 million, about as much as the building made from rent. By 1936, the deck was packed daily. There was a cafeteria at the top. By 1944, 5 million people had visited.
The building owners stopped thinking like office landlords and started thinking like theme park operators. In recent years, the observation decks alone have pulled in more than $100 million a year, with profit margins that would make a tech CEO blush. And that's just one of its revenue streams. Why does this one tower make so much money? In 2023, the Empire State Building Observatory generated about $129 million in revenue. In 2024, that climbed to around $136 million. It's definitely not a side hustle. That's standalone business that just happens to sit on the 86th and 102nd floors. But long before the tourist boom, the tower had already found another purpose in the sky.
In 1931, NBC and RCA moved in, taking space on the 85th floor. They started experimental television broadcasts from a small antenna perched on the mast. Soon, they were testing FM radio too. The first prototype FM transmitter in the world went up right there. For regular New Yorkers, that meant better radio and TV. For the building, it meant something else: rent from the air itself. By the early 1950s, 6 broadcasters agreed to pay a combined $600,000 a year to use the Empire State Building's antenna. Serious money back then, and today obviously. Later, more TV and FM stations joined, as the building developed a master antenna set up for dozens of stations. You can think of it like a vertical strip mall in the sky. On the ground and lower floors, you've got retail. Above, you've got offices paying rent by the square foot. Near the top, you've got tourists paying by the hour. And right at the tip, antennas, dishes, and transmitters, companies paying by the wavelength. After the World Trade Center towers were built, many broadcasters moved their antennas there. Then came September 11, 2001. The towers fell, the broadcast masts on their roofs vanished with them. Broadcasters suddenly had very few options. Guests who still had a ready-to-go broadcast platform already tested, already wired, already high enough? Yes. Within weeks, most of New York's TV and FM stations were transmitting again from the Empire State Building. Years later, a lawsuit accused the Empire State's owner of price gouging a nonprofit radio station with a lease whose fees rose faster than inflation. In 2010 filings, the building reported about $16 million from broadcasting, pure antenna rent from 317 feet of vertical steel. For decades, the Empire State Building was privately controlled. People guessed it was lucrative, but no one really knew how lucrative it would be. Then came the IPO. In 2013, the owners bundled the building with other properties into a real estate investment trust, Empire State Realty Trust, and went public. That meant filings, SEC documents, and numbers, the real ones. Suddenly, the world saw the breakdown. For the full year of 2010, the Empire State Building produced roughly $197.4 million in revenue. About $79 million came from the observatory, around $16 million from broadcasting. Office and retail rents brought in roughly $102.4 million. If you're a developer in New York, that's not just interesting. That's a business model to copy, and they did. One World Trade Center, Hudson Yards Edge, One Vanderbilt Summit all jumped into the observation deck game, selling glass floors, mirrored rooms, and Instagram-optimized views in a race for tourist dollars.
Meanwhile, the Empire State Building quietly doubled down. It invested about $165 million in upgrading the observatory experience. New exhibits, glassed-in 102nd floor windows, better queuing, a carefully curated journey that feels more like a museum than an elevator line. Downstairs, they reimagined the Empire State Building store. Around 4,500 square feet, more than 800 exclusive products, partnerships with brands like Swarovski and Baccarat, even a King Kong section. Not just souvenirs, high margin, high emotion retail plugged directly into the tourist pipeline. With all this talk about tourists and antennas, it's easy to forget the obvious. The Empire State Building is still an office building. It has about 2.7 million rentable square feet of office space and more than 160,000 square feet of retail. That's the so-called normal money. Month-to-month rent, escalations, office leases measured in dollars per square foot. But there's one more layer that never shows up neatly on a balance sheet: brand.
In 2004, according to the Empire State Realty Trust annual report, the Empire State Building racked up an estimated 485 billion media impressions worldwide. Movies, TV, social media, news, photos, ads. By the early 1930s, Hollywood had discovered the building. In 1933, two filmmakers, Marion C. Cooper and Ernest Shustak, turned it into a stage for one of the most famous scenes in movie history. Their film is King Kong. A giant ape climbs the Empire State Building, swats at biplanes, and falls to his death from the top. It's pure fantasy, but it locks the building into global imagination. Even today, the Empire State Building's museum includes a King Kong exhibit. In just a few years, the building went from giant real estate mistake to global movie star. But the scariest scene involving the Empire State Building didn't come from a studio. It came from the US Air Force. July 28, 1945. World War II is almost over. That morning, a B-25 Mitchell bomber was flying from Bedford Army Airfield in Massachusetts to LaGuardia Airport in New York. The aircraft was unable to land as scheduled. The pilot, Lieutenant Colonel William Smith Jr., got caught in heavy fog and requested to divert to Newark Metropolitan Airport in New Jersey. Visibility was awful. He was flying low, trying to find his way by sight. Down on Fifth Avenue, it's a normal Saturday. The bomber breaks through the cloud at the worst possible moment, directly in front of the plane, the north face of the Empire State Building. There's no time to turn. At about 9:40 a.m., the plane slams into the 79th floor. One engine rips through an office and out the other side. The other drops into an elevator shaft and falls all the way down. Fuel erupts into a fireball. 14 people are killed. 3 crew members and 11 people in the building. Around 24 more are injured. From the street, bystanders look up and see the tallest building in the world on fire. Inside, on the 80th floor, a 20-year-old elevator operator named Betty Lou Oliver is finishing her shift. The impact blows her out of an elevator and into the hallway, badly burned. Rescuers find her and try to send her down to the ground floor in another elevator, unaware that the cables in that shaft are already damaged. The elevator car drops 75 stories, roughly 1,000 feet, straight down the shaft. If you're already scared of elevators, I'm sorry. Under any normal circumstances, she wouldn't have survived. Instead, a strange combination of physics and luck saves her. As the car falls, air pressure builds up below, acting like a giant cushion. At the bottom, an oil buffer and tons of tangled cable create a softer landing. Softer is relative here. It still crushes the cabin to debris, but somehow Betty survives. Broken pelvis, broken back, legs shattered, but alive. She ends up holding the world record for the longest survived elevator fall.
And yet, for all the engineering, people still whisper about ghosts. There is a rumor, as usual, that the building is haunted. Night guards talk about seeing shadows move down empty corridors. Phones ring on locked floors. Footsteps echo in stairwells with nobody there. Elevators that are supposed to be parked for the night stop on a random floor, doors sliding open into darkness. Are those just the sounds of an old mechanical giant settling in its sleep? Maybe. Or maybe a tower that has seen suicides, accidents, and a literal plane crash simply carries its history loudly. Personally, I think if any building on Earth has the right to creak with memories, it's this one.
Over the decades, New York has continued to change around it. New towers rise. The original World Trade Center went up downtown in the 1970s and stole the tallest crown. After 9/11, the Empire State Building once again stood as the tallest in the city until 2012, when One World Trade Center reclaimed that title. Glassy, super tall condos sprout along the park. The Empire State Building slips down the rankings. Today, it's only around the 8th tallest in New York, about 10th in the US, and somewhere around the 16th worldwide, depending on how you count. On paper, it's been overtaken. In people's heads, it hasn't. Part of that is the design. It's pure Art Deco. Strong vertical lines, setbacks that make it look like it's climbing even when it's standing still, and a crown that looks like it belongs in a 1930s comic book about the future. But part of it is what happens every night when the sun drops. The building didn't always glow like it does now. In the early years, there were basic white searchlights. In 1932, they lit them to signal Franklin Roosevelt's election victory over Hoover. Later, they used big floodlights so people could see the tower during the World's Fair. Then, in the 1970s, a lighting designer named Douglas Lay pushed for something more dramatic: colored lights. First red, white, and blue for the US bicentennial in 1976. Today, the lights are powered by a LED system with over 1,000 computer-controlled fixtures, capable of showing more than 16 million colors. If you live in New York long enough, you get used to looking up at it the way you check the weather. Green must be the Jets. Orange and blue, Knicks tonight. Blue and yellow, maybe Ukraine's Independence Day. Inside, the Empire State Building has reinvented itself more times than some people change careers. The indoor observatory on the 80th floor and the observation decks on the 86th and 102nd floors bring in millions of tourists every year. About 4 million people make the climb annually, riding 73 elevators from the lobby to the sky. On the upper floors, offices keep shifting. Tech companies, media, financial firms, startups with names that sound like energy drinks. The building has undergone major energy upgrades to be more efficient, less of an old, clunky beast and more of a tuned-up classic car. On a really good day, you can see 5, sometimes even 6 states: New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Connecticut, Massachusetts, and if the air is crystal clear, the low blue line of Delaware way out there. And of course, that view comes with drama. This building is a lightning magnet. That spire, topped with a copper lightning rod, is struck about 20 to 25 times a year on average. The building was engineered to withstand not just wind and lightning, but even according to the 1930 Popular Mechanics estimate, a 50-ton jolt to the mast and substructure without collapsing.
If you were standing on that 86th floor deck right now, looking out at the rivers, bridges, and tiny cabs below, what would you be thinking about? I know my answer. I'd lean on the rails, squint at the city lights, and think, we really did that in just over a year during a depression, while arguing about who had the bigger building. And then I'd probably take a photo like everyone else. So stick around, hit subscribe, and keep climbing with us, because once you've stood 1,000 feet above Midtown, it's hard not to wonder what else is hiding inside the next piece of steel on the horizon.